Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to this evening's compelling discussion on a topic that sits at the crossroads of innovation and ethics, artificial intelligence, and law. We are living in a time of unprecedented technological transformation where the rapid evolution of AI is reshaping industries, societies, and even the very fabric of our legal systems. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly integrated into our lives, it brings with it a host of profound questions that challenge our traditional notions of justice, accountability, and human rights. Can machines be held responsible for their decisions? Can algorithms designed by humans ever be truly free of bias? How do we regulate harmful content generated not by people but by bots? What happens when AI systems are implicated in criminal activities? And as more individuals turn to AI powered chatbots for legal advice, what does this mean for the future of legal practice and regulation? These are not just theoretical questions, they're urgent, real world challenges that demand thoughtful deliberation and innovative solutions. Today, we are privileged to explore these critical questions and more with one of the most distinguished legal minds of our time, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Before we begin, it is my pleasure to invite Honorable Sri Justice V.M. Shyamkumar, Judge, High Court of Kerala, and Executive Council Member, Indian Law Institute Kerala State Unit, to deliver the introductory address.
Thank you, Gauri. Good evening to all. Let me begin by congratulating the Indian Law Institute Kerala State Unit for organizing this discourse on a topic of great contemporary relevance. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is all set to revolutionize almost all aspects of human life. AI, it is said, would impact mankind just like the invention of the wheel, which had changed or altered the course of the human society. Well, some would rather say that AI would be the last reinvention of the wheel because due to the AI, we will be reaching the peak of human innovation. AI is capable of thinking, creating, and more importantly, even improving itself. And the need for further groundbreaking innovations by mankind may diminish. So that is the reason why it is termed at times as the last reinvention of the wheel. Just like other areas of human endeavor, AI would have an impact on law and the justice delivery system too. AI could, well, rather impact the mundane legal work like document review, legal drafting, analysis of contracts, and more importantly, streamlining of legal research. But the question is, can it go beyond that? Can AI be used so as to enhance the efficiency and accuracy of the legal process? Can it be used to provide better access to justice to the marginalized communities? Can it be used to enhance the decision-making capabilities, like something that I do as a judge? And for me, it assumes great importance because I've all along been taught in the law school that judges are, after all, human beings, and they can look at issues only through their own eyes. However objective that they may try to be, they are subjective to the extent they can only look at these issues through their own eyes. That is why I think Cardoso said that judges are not free from the pushes and pulls of the cosmos. Or rather, Julius Stone would say that the great currents of life that wash away the human beings do not change the course when they confront a judge. So the question is, can we bring in, with the help of AI, objectivity to the extent that we expect it from a judicial decision-making process? Well, however hard we may try, that there would be some situations where, or some limitations that we may face when we come to when we proceed to depend on machines. But still, AI can make substantial improvements when it comes to not only judicial process, but also whatever the law would do in our society. I think that what we should be concerned with is when we import AI, could there be biases or discriminations that could be built into the system? Can there be transparency as we expect it should be there in a legal process? What would be the nature of accountability and liability issues associated with AI? We are here to listen, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy, and I look forward to this discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful introduction. It is with great honor and excitement that I welcome a truly remarkable individual, a beacon of legal excellence and social justice, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. Dr. Guruswamy has forged a path of distinction in the legal arena, tackling complex cases that span both commercial and criminal law. Her impressive roster of clients includes some of the most influential names in the industry, such as Reliance Industries, Bloomberg, and Unitech, to name a few, which speaks volumes of her expertise and reputation. Dr. Guruswamy's academic credentials are equally impressive. She is a former Rhodes Scholar, having secured a doctorate in law and master's in law from Oxford University, master's in law from Harvard University, and a bachelor's degree from the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. Her journey in law began in 1997 under the mentorship of the esteemed former Attorney General Ashok H. Desai. She later practiced in mergers and acquisitions law in New York as an associate at Davis, Polk and Wardwell, and is admitted to the bars in New York. Some of the most important and successful appearances of hers includes Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court overturned Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which marked a significant step towards equality and dignity of all citizens. Augusta Westland Helicopters case that alleged corrupt practices in defense procurement, Vijay Mandalal Chaudhary case where a constitutional challenge was made to India's money laundering law, and Devdas versus Air India case before the courts in Montreal, Canada. Dr. Menaka Guruswamy also has an active sports law practice representing state and district associations in the football litigation before the Supreme Court of India concerning the suspension of the All India Football Association by FIFA. In 2023, she became the first non-American to be honored with the University of Virginia's Jefferson Medal in Law, which is the highest honor of the university, which is equivalent of an honorary degree. Beyond her impressive legal practice, she has worked at the United Nations Development Fund, advised on lawmaking in South Sudan for UNICEF, and constitution making in Nepal. She has also made significant contributions to the academia and has taught at various universities across the world, including the New York University, Yale Law School, and Columbia Law School. In 2019, she was on Foreign Policy magazine's list of 100 most influential global thinkers and Time magazine's list of 100 most influential people of the year. Dr. Guruswamy is a regular contributor to the New York Times, the New York Review of Books, the American Journal of International Law, and the Indian Express. She is also the co-editor of the book Founding Moments in Constitutionalism. Please join me in extending a warm and heartfelt welcome to our speaker, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy, and we also invite our viewers to share your questions for our speaker in the comment box, out of which we'll be selecting two for the speaker to address during the question and answer session at the end.
Thank you, Gauri, very much. Thank you, Justice Kumar, for being here today after a long day in court, no doubt. I'm really happy to be here, especially to talk about a topic that I'm very deeply interested in. In my column in the Indian Express, I've probably written at least 20, 30 pieces on artificial intelligence. And I think it is really the idea of our times, it is the instrument of our times, and it is the innovation of our times, because it is certain to change the trajectory of human beings as a species and what we will do going forward. So I want to spend about 20 minutes talking about artificial intelligence and, of course, the law. But I also want to engage the science of it, because I think often as lawyers, we're too unidimensional. The law exists amidst science and social science and history and poetry and all of that. So I'd like to also talk about the science of it. So we'll very quickly discuss in about 20 minutes what is AI. AI as lawyers today are using it, especially in India, and how valuable AI has become Artificial intelligence and tech companies are 9 of the 10 top market capitalized companies in the world. That is how valuable it is. And I've written a column called AI is the New Oil, because erstwhile, the most valuable companies in the world were resource companies, oil companies, gas companies. And that's not the case anymore. And we'll end with a very quick discussion of a lovely case that is pending in the American courts right now. And it is the New York Times versus OpenAI, because it actually asks the question that if you have these large language models like ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever, then can copyright law continue to exist at all? Can we have intellectual property ownership of our intellectual work? If I write a column, so on and so forth, or if Justice Kumar writes a judgment, for instance. So we'll talk about all of this. So I want to quickly start off. It's about it's a little past 6:10. I'm going to take 20 minutes, and then maybe we can open this up for a few questions. So in 1955, right, the idea of artificial intelligence has existed for a long time. But in 1955, a man called John McCarthy said, artificial intelligence is allowing a machine to behave in such a way that it would be called intelligent if a human being behaved in this way. So it's allowing a machine to behave in such a way that it would be called intelligent if a human being behaved in this way. Now, the most common way that artificial intelligence is used today, right, whether it's unfortunately, Justice Kumar, whether it's in legal practice, I wonder if my juniors use this, large law firms, is the use of a chatty bot called ChatGPT, which is a product of a company called OpenAI. Now, basically, ChatGPT is this revolutionary idea. And now, of course, there's more than one company like this. It's a large language model, right? So what it does is you can ask ChatGPT any question. For instance, many years ago, I decided to see, well, how good is ChatGPT? So I asked it a question in my own area of practice, right, which I encounter often, money laundering law. So I asked ChatGPT, what is the offense of money laundering in India? Now, ChatGPT, and this was 2.5 years ago, because since then, the models have grown more sophisticated. ChatGPT not only identified the relevant statute, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, but quickly proceeded to list the important ingredients of the offense: proceeds of crime, knowledge, concealment, possession, projecting as legitimate, all the ingredients that the statute would require. And then it gave me a few lines in explanation. So then I thought, okay, that's interesting, but this is knowledge that could be culled from a statute. So I asked it a more subjective but complex question, Justice Kumar, and you'd be interested to know. So then I said, who is the best judge of the Supreme Court? This is what I asked ChatGPT. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and I was pleasantly surprised. It gave me a reasoned and institutionally appropriate response. It said, quote, it is not appropriate to designate a single judge as the best judge of the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court is comprised of a bench of highly experienced and knowledgeable judges who work to uphold the Constitution and ensure justice for all citizens. The quality of their work is evaluated based on their judicial opinions, decision, and the overall impact on the legal system, which I thought was a very responsible answer by the bot, right? So not only was it informative, PMLA, so on and so forth, but it was an attempt to be objective, right? And refusing to kind of pander to subjective biases, right? So I think it was interesting that the chatbot would quickly generate this information. This is the kind of information, what are the ingredients of a statute, that one would do in our first couple of years of practice as a junior. My senior, Mr. Desai, would say, okay, well, what is the statute? What is case law? What are the ingredients? Put together a quick note. ChatGPT can do a fairly decent first draft of a research note, right? And that is interesting because it is able to absorb and process vast amounts of information and throw it back in a way that the user finds the interface to be chatty, accessible, and the language is easy to digest, right? All of this is very, very interesting. Now, what does this mean in real terms, right? Because now I think we must have the world of science also meet the world of economics, right? And what does this mean? How radically revolutionary is artificial intelligence? Because today it's not just about ChatGPT, right? Which is not a very sophisticated large language model. It's also about how AI is used in medical procedures. There are many kinds of precise surgical procedures that are done in our country by AI. Robots being run by AI, right? And the margin of error is much, much, much smaller than if a human surgeon was able to perform this, would perform this, right? So you're seeing this in design, in architecture. ChatGPT can take the lawyer's bar exam quite capably and very successfully. ChatGPT can also, AI today can satisfy architect exams all over the world, right? So it's being used in different arenas. And because it's being used in different arenas, it also means that you are seeing a rapid market capitalization of companies that work with tech. So in 1941, the most radical revolutionary innovation or discovery was the innovative use of penicillin for the therapeutic use on human beings. And that dramatically changed not only how we were able to deal with illness and and various kinds of illnesses, but it dramatically increased the lifespan of human beings. After 1941 and the use of penicillin for therapeutic purposes, I would believe that it is artificial intelligence and its use and deployment in the past few years and in the next few years to come that will be the most dramatic innovation in terms of the human species, right? So one, let's quantify that economically. And two, I also want to talk about, well, what are the legal issues that this poses? And we'll talk about some case law. So for instance, what does this mean economically, right? And economically, it means that companies, the most dramatic market valuation of any company right now in the history of human beings, since we started, mapping how companies are valued on stock markets and so on and so forth, is a small company called NVIDIA, NVIDIA. And this is quite important, right? Because NVIDIA is the world's leading producer of graphic processing units, GPUs, and semiconductor chips that are used in AI systems. NVIDIA, at the time, before this wonderful Chinese company called DeepSeek came into being, at the time in 2024, in the middle of 2024, controlled 80% of the market on these GPUs and semiconductor chips. Now, how valuable are GPUs and what does it mean for artificial intelligence? So Mark Zuckerberg in March 2024 said that his company Meta will be placing an order for 350,000 NVIDIA chips. That one order itself is worth billions of dollars. So how has this reshaped wealth as we understand it in the modern marketplace? This has reshaped wealth because tech companies, right, like Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, tech companies have shattered the domination of traditionally natural resource-based oil or gas or large manufacturing behemoths. So in 2024, Forbes' list of top 5 companies had Microsoft with a market capitalization of $3.085 trillion. This was followed by Apple with a cap of $2.889 trillion. The only oil and gas company in the top 10 today is Saudi Aramco. Alphabet, Google, and Amazon. These are the 5 most valuable companies in the world. And NVIDIA, then, with its market cap of 1.784 trillion, was the 6th most valuable company in the world, followed by Zuckerberg's Meta, right? And NVIDIA was founded very recently in 1993 by 3 people, an engineer, a microprocessor designer, and a graphic chip designer, sitting in a small roadside diner in California. And they basically came up with this idea of GPUs and semiconductor chips, which is what fuels any AI instrument or model that is used anywhere on the planet, right? So NVIDIA's first $1 trillion as a public company took 24 years to earn, but the next 2 trillion took exactly 8 months. Now, money isn't important, but money is always indicative of what is going to be valuable at present and in future. So it's really interesting that where oil used to be the main wealth in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, AI and everything related to AI, everything related to tech, whether it's GPUs, whether it's semiconductor chips, whether it's instruments related to AI, this will be what new wealth looks like. Right? So today, NVIDIA's GPU chips are used in generative bots, and that is what ChatGPT is, right? It is a generative bot. Like most tech companies, of course, NVIDIA, India is quite interesting because tech companies all have very large presence in India. So NVIDIA employs, 4,000 Indians, right? So, and of course, there are new versions of these chatbots coming up. Google has Gemini, and China has DeepSeek. Now, what does this mean, right? What does this mean for conventional law as we understand it, and in the context specifically of intellectual property law, right? What does this mean? Because in the context of intellectual property law, you have patents and you have copyright. And in many ways, this is how we protect what is the most valuable property that any human being deploys and then creates, our intellect, right? So how these large language model and chatbots work is that they just absorb as much reading material as they can. That includes op-eds, investigative reporting in newspapers, in magazines, in books. They can digest hundreds and hundreds of books at any given point of time. They can digest hundreds of judgments at any given point of time, right? But what it does is it eats up all of this. Now, what does this mean for those who own the intellectual property in these fields? So what does it mean for a newspaper whose op-eds and whose investigative reports are being digested, absorbed and digested by, say, ChatGPT, and then being thrown back out by it when, say, Gauri asks it a question? So the response to who is the best Supreme Court judge is a very interesting one. Is this something that ChatGPT arrives at by just wide reading? Or is it something that has been extracted from, say, an op-ed or a piece written on the Supreme Court, right? We don't know. But the New York Times, in a very high-profile case in December 2023, sued OpenAI and Microsoft, right? Both OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement, right? And they have been joined by novelists, newspapers, writers, poets, Hollywood actors, who are basically suing AI and tech companies for copyright violation. So Scarlett Johansson, I don't know if many of you watched her, but she acted in a movie where she plays AI, is suing ChatGPT in turn for using her voice without her permission. Right? So what are the contours of ownership of my voice, of my face, of my mind, if open AI type instruments are just harvesting all of this without remunerating or compensating for that? So basically, the New York Times case is interesting, it's pending, and it is actually indicative of the kind of litigation that will come, no doubt, including to courts in India, right? And what does it do? So the New York Times in December 2023, in their petition, say this, that the defendants, that's OpenAI and Microsoft, the defendants' generative artificial intelligence tools rely on large language models that were built by copying and using millions of New York Times copyrighted news articles, in-depth investigations, opinion pieces, reviews, how-to guides, and more. While the defendants, OpenAI and Microsoft, engaged in wide-scale copying from many sources, they gave the Times content particular emphasis when building their large language models, revealing a preference that recognizes the values of those works. The New York Times, and absolutely and you can find these pleadings online. It's actually a masterclass in drafting and pleading, right? It's brief, it's clever, it's up to speed with the law. And it basically says that the Copyright Act and the American Constitution recognizes the critical importance of giving creators exclusive rights over their works. The newspaper felt strongly that their copyright was being violated by OpenAI and Microsoft, and hence they were unable to enjoy the fruits of their labor and investment. How does the New York Times explain this alleged exploitation of their labor? They argue that large language models containing copies of Times content was being digested and was being used to generate output that recites the Times content verbatim, or closely summarizes it, or mimics its expressive style. And to demonstrate this, the New York Times gave hundreds of examples where information was being lifted by ChatGPT from New York Times articles. So the Times argued that the defendants were using its intellectual property without paying for it and enriching themselves. And the Times links this abuse of intellectual property protected worth to the growth in Microsoft's valuation to trillions of dollars and OpenAI's ChatGPT valuation of 90 billion. So we also discussed the market capitalization, that is staggering for tech companies. And the Times is challenging both of those things. It is saying that your abuse of my copyright, my intellectual property, is actually contributing to your fabulous growth and market capitalization, and therefore I have a right to your wealth, so to speak. So in a bid to address the argument of fair use, and you know that in copyright law, fair use is a defense against infringement, the newspaper argued that there was nothing transformative about using its content without payment to create products that substitute the newspaper and steal audiences away from it. Now, in response, right, Microsoft and OpenAI actually fought back by saying that this is actually monopolistic. And OpenAI said that the Times actually paid someone to hack into its products. And the Times is actually submitting to court and filing in court highly anomalous results that constitute illustrations in their complaint. They say that the newspaper was only doing this by targeting and exploiting a bug by using deceptive prompts that blatantly violate OpenAI's terms of use. Microsoft responds in an even more fabulous way by comparing the New York Times lawsuit to the one waged by the Motion Picture Association of America and Hollywood against the VCR. Now, Dr. Kumar and I are both of a generation which still use the VCR or the video cassette recorder, right? There were no CDs when I was a teenager, Dr. Kumar. And I remember that, it was a prized thing to be able to rent a VCR and rent a cassette. And of course, who knew that by renting, we were breaking copyright law. But anyway, in the early 1990s in Delhi and the late 1980s, I didn't know all of this. I would just walk off to my local cassette store and get like the newest Hollywood movies on VCR. So the Microsoft actually compares it to that, says that when the VCR was first introduced, the entertainment industry also claimed that copyright was violated. As the Time wrote in its brief, the United States Supreme Court rejected the alarmism and voted for technological innovation and consumer choice in its seminal decision in Sony Corp of India versus Universal City Studios, freeing consumers from broadcast schedules and ushering it into an on-demand world. That case still continues, right? So it's not been decided. But from our perspective in India, right, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Bing, so on, large language models enable us to harness for relatively no money or for free information and knowledge as we might need it, right? So there is this other component to intellectual property ownership, right? Which is the needs and the needs and the requirements of the global south, right? To be able to access that kind of information, right? And you've had copyright cases being decided by our courts on this count. Is it fair use? Is it necessary? How do you open up knowledge to a world where there is high inequalities, variations of purchasing power, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, do you not do you not need intellectual property protection if you seek to, in fact, support and you seek to support innovation, writing, ideas, creativity? How do you compensate if that is all being harnessed and taken away for free, right? Secondly. Thirdly, how do you deal with the fact that a bot might be impersonating, a well-known human being, celebrity? There are AI which pretend that Sachin Tendulkar is speaking in favor of a political party. There is AI generated messages that Mahendra Singh Dhoni is apparently giving in favor of a political party. We know that these are fake messages. But what is the valuation? How do you target that? Do you just target that as fake news? Are there, in fact, copyright and life interests that these purveyors, that Sachin and Dhoni have in their own likeness, in their persona, in their reputation, in their speech, and in their talent, right? So these are some of the competing interests that need to be balanced when we think about open AI and when we think about any kind of large language model. OpenAI, ChatGPT is just the best known one that many, many lawyers use. But this is the kind of challenge that artificial intelligence will and is, in fact, presenting to us both as just human beings. How do I protect my children from social media and AI bots that will target them if they are going to go on social media? But also as lawyers, how do I make sure that my colleagues in my chamber are actually generating meaningful legal memos and not just siphoning it from ChatGPT? Many things to think about. So I'll stop here. I'll open this up for a few questions. It can be more than two if there are any, or otherwise we can just continue to have a short conversation.
Yes, ma'am, I'll get back to you with the questions in a minute.
Then I must ask Justice Kumar a question, which is, Judge, now at ILI or the judiciary, are you tapping into the potential of AI?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my
Right.
knowledge.
Right.
The impact of AI or ChatGPT that I have felt as a judge here is in the pleadings that I received.
Right. Right.
Formerly, I used to come across lots of repetitions or whatever pleadings that they file. It would have lots of imperfections in language, punctuation difficulties, and lots of grammatical mistakes.
Right.
But now I find that everyone has excellent English. And
Wonderful.
then excellent
That is a
English.
plus.
I can't find even a single grammatical error or linguistic mistake in the English that they use. And secondly, the tendency to quote the legal provisions as well as legal materials in pleadings, which is generally not necessary also, but increases, which I think is because they get it as part of the ChatGPT. And so profuse mentioning of provisions, precedents, and all. And I find most of them to be very concise also. Very clear, concise. It deals with almost all, as you were rightly pointing out. It gives us everything. If it is about money laundering, everything essentially that one should know about it. If it is about bills of lading, almost starting from the first decision to the latest decisions are there. I think that the lawyer community is benefiting a lot out of this. And especially I find that youngsters are putting it to very good use. And it is something that has to be appreciated. As to whether some concern that I would have is not with respect to I would term it as the mundane things that you usually do in a law office, like drafting, legal research, and things like that. beyond this, that element of objectivity. If we say that, say, for example, this is the decision that is to be taken in the case of a particular legal issue, can that be programmed so as to reach a particular result by taking out or culling out certain other aspects of it? Insofar, personally, since I'm totally illiterate when it comes to this chat GPT and these new things are concerned, I feel both the decisions that are given out or the opinions that are given out by ChatGPT and DeepSeek, for that example, substantially vary on the same subject. I don't know. I'm just asking you.
Yes, yes.
If
So,
that is so, that is something that substantially affects the credibility or the reliability of this system.
that's right. So I don't know if you followed this, Judge, but recently Elon Musk has a new AI large language model. Now, that large language, it's called Grok, right? So now we have Grok, we have ChatGPT, we have DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a little worrying. I've not used DeepSeek because it's got part of its programming and ability to extract information, which is a little disconcerting and troubling, so I'm a bit careful. But now these bots, for lack of better language, each also have a kind of political position, because after all, the programmers who are letting it read all of this have their own political positions, their own biases. I'm being polite when I say political position, right? They have their own biases. So, about a year ago, there's an African American Google engineer who came out with this large interview, and you can find it online, where she talks about the fact that because most programmers in this company were male, white, of a certain, region and class, the biases that were being fed into this AI. Now, if you talk about human biases, then you have a plethora of anti-discrimination laws, starting from the Constitution downwards, right? To make sure that I conform, that I cannot discriminate in my workplace, so on and so forth. But when it comes to AI that is being used, say, for instance, in New York, there was a case where they were using AI to sift through job applications. And they realized that AI also had biases because it read coding. So it preferred sport being played of a certain kind of sport. Now, typically, more men would play that than women. So then women are disadvantaged. It preferred a certain kind of geographical area where you lived. That also, as you know, unfortunately, in the world, we are still living in demographic ghettos all over the world. It's not like, America is so much better. So all these things it was picking up, it was coding. So it was preferring men of a certain kind because it was being programmed mostly. So how do you, and I think, Gauri had also picked up on this when she first started. How do you factor in biases of AI? And this is a very good question you asked, Judge, if you put in the same question to Grok, to ChatGPT, to DeepSeek, will you get one objective answer or do you get variations of answers? Then we're back to the same thing, which is different opinion makers generating different kinds of opinions. So I think there's very, very, very interesting challenges. But this, which you say, that the quality of the pleadings that you read has been cleaned up. Now, that is a definite plus, Judge. That is a definite win-win, and that is probably a great equalizer, because it means even if you are not so adept in the language of the court, but you have a good mind, then you can also be a player, which is actually a great equalizer. Because why should we prefer one kind of skill with a language over maybe another, which is just knowledge of the law and the ability to present it, right? So I think that this is a definite win-win. But now the question is, Judge, and we're seeing this in other occupations, it hasn't come to the law in India yet, but in other Western jurisdictions where they have the reverse, which is they have few people and multiple needs. So they are using AI software to do away with the kind of functions that first, second, third year associates at large law firms used to perform. Due diligence, document review, this can all be done by software now. Why should you spend on a human being? It suits them because they have those demographic constraints. Whereas we are a young country, average age of an Indian is 28. So I'm much older than that. So I am not the average Indian. But then you have to provide jobs. You have to have that kind of employment opportunity, right? So there are those challenges also. For instance, in Germany is moving towards a completely driverless car. So German companies, in tandem with the government, the innovation is moving towards there. So automatic cars is one big step towards that. Soon everything will turn automatic. Now in India, can you have driverless cars? Not just of the wonderful nature of an Indian street, but also because you cannot afford for those jobs to disappear, of Ola, Uber drivers, so on, and taxi drivers, so on and so forth. So I think there are many challenges, and I will leave it at that.
Ma'am, one question for you.
Yes.
There are recent conversations about the enormous environmental impacts of AI,
Yes.
pivoting on the fact that servers of AI companies consume huge volumes of water. Shouldn't
Yes.
a nation be regulating such aspects of AI, considering the fact that the Silicon Valley of our nation already faces acute water shortage issues?
Yes. No, that's absolutely right. What a wonderful question, and you're completely right. To use these semiconductor chips and to generate that kind of processing capability, we use an enormous amount of water, electricity, and you're right, Bangalore is in throes of a water crisis. So absolutely, legislation, laws, regulation need to actually navigate these questions. I mean, in relation and related to that also is, you'll have challenges as you move towards electric vehicles, EVs. The batteries that EVs use are almost entirely indestructible, and they have a finite lifespan of a year or 2 years. Then what happens? What is the environmental concept? These are the kinds of environmental challenges, that will present itself, and it needs lawmakers firstly to understand that large language models and AI need that kind of resources, and then to try to regulate. So both things need to happen. But very lovely question. Good point.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a fascinating discussion on the future of law in the age of artificial intelligence. Thank you, ma'am, for challenging our assumptions and inspiring us to think more deeply about the implications of AI on our legal systems. I now invite Advocate Neenu Pavitran to deliver the concluding address.
Good evening, all. First of all, I would like to thank Senior to take for taking a short time for us from a busy schedule. Actually, when I was entrusted with this task of rendering the concluding remarks, I was quite skeptical because I'm kind of 100% unaware of the subject, and that it was not even an area of interest for me. But I think after listening to the senior, I started feeling like I should know more about the subject and I should delve into this area more. And that is a personal takeaway for me from this session. And I think this will be the same for almost all the viewers here, especially the area of AI and violation of intellectual property rights. We know it's very much relevant these days, but I don't know how much lawyers over here has dealt with all these issues. Thank you, ma'am, for taking us to all these things. As quoting your own words, it's though AI and it's become unstoppable, and it's competing interests that should be balanced. That's what you said. And as Shamsar also said, but in our legal profession, I don't think we use AI to the 100%. There are a lot of things we could do more about it, we could utilize in our profession. But yeah, more to go. And we don't know where we'll stand in like 5 years from now. And moving on, I'm thanking you, ma'am, again. And I also hope that we'll soon have the privilege to have a physical session with you for the lawyers out here in Kerala with ILI itself
Absolutely.
holding the
I'd love to do
session
that. I'd love to do
soon.
that. Soon.
And Moving on, ma'am, I would like to express my gratitude to Sham sir, who's also an executive member of the ILI, for the introductory remark, which set the evening completely on tone, and Balagopal sir, who's also an executive committee member, Gauri for a clear rendering of being a master of ceremony. She's an expert, and the entire team of ILI that is guided by Parati ma'am and Unni sir. They are the backbone of our team. Thank you all for the great evening. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Take care, Judge. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank
It was a treat hearing you.
Evening
Thank
well
you.
spent.
Bye,
Thank you.
Parvati. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Indian Law Institute, Kerala State Unit, I extend our deepest gratitude to Dr. Menaka Guruswamy for her invaluable insights. I also